bracket is designed here at the top does not make sense. You're taking away the reward of actually being one of the more dominant, consistent football teams in the country by pairing them up against SEC and Big Ten opponents. So it's a little interesting. But
I mean, look at it. SMU, you're going to have to see Alabama or Notre Dame after a first-round bye. This is the spot to beat.
Yeah.
Next year, they got to change this whole thing up of how it is for automatic bids.
You could be reseeding. You could be searching for a lot of answers.
What happens if Boise State loses to UNLV? Then
chaos. Madness. Chaos. Let's go. Rankings reaction getting started right now, baby. Bang, bang.
Welcome to Rankings Reaction presented by Allstate. This is the penultimate ranking released before the real deal coming up on Sunday. Maddie, what does penultimate mean?
Penultimate? It's the week before the last one.
Thank you very much.
The second to last, penultimate.
Very good.
I had to look it up. When he wrote in the rundown, I was like, what the hell does this mean? But yeah, here we are, the penultimate.
Here we are. We have already kind of come to the end of this thing. We are now getting the rankings, and we have conference championship week coming up this week. A lot of teams out there still with a lot to gain. There are also some with potentially a lot to lose. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the updated rankings here. According to our 13-member committee, we have got movement. Ohio State, after their fourth straight loss to Michigan, they drop from number 2 to number 5. Doesn't hurt them all that much at the moment. Still hosting a playoff game in Columbus. The Miami Hurricanes spun themselves all the way down to 12 with their loss to Syracuse. SMU jumps into that spot. Remember, we have to have the 4 highest-ranked conference champions get a bye. So right now, SMU projected out of the ACC. Miami sitting as the first team out, even though they are ranked 12th, have to make room for that 5th highest-ranked conference champion, which at the moment is Arizona State. And, guys, the pitchforks are out in the SEC. Pitchforks are out because who is getting in the 3-loss SEC teams right now?
High Tide.
High Tide. Alabama gets in at the 11th spot. Let's start with Miami, though, and their loss to Syracuse. Not only knocked them out of the ACC championship, it right now has knocked them out of the field. Maddie, correct, incorrect? Should Miami still be in the field, or do you think they are right where they should be?
I think they're where they should be. I think the loss really is more so just how the committee sees this encapsulates the close wins that they had earlier in the year. The close win against Cal, Virginia Tech, the victory against Duke, which was a one-score game there in the fourth quarter. The whole season has just been let's survive in advance. They've been doing that. And because they have tripped over themselves here in these last few weeks against Georgia Tech and now Syracuse, I feel like the committee has enough weapons really against them to say, all right, you are not one of the top 12 teams, or 11 teams, excuse me, and that is the reason why they're out now.
I mean, right now you don't have any wins against a top 25 team.
That's the key.
Louisville and Duke, and that loss to Syracuse, it was tough. But we all saw that throughout the season where we said, hold on, Miami, that last game to close out the regular season is not an easy one because Kyle McCord and the Honda McCord baby, all right? He can go ahead and light you up when it comes down to the game. And I think that Miami defense has just been the huge Achilles heel. But when you look at Alabama and what they've been able to do this season, who are their best wins? They beat South Carolina. They beat Georgia. Yes, I understand that loss to Oklahoma was very ugly. And that loss to Tennessee, it is a top 25 team. So for Alabama, right now they have a better case. And shout out to everybody in the YouTube chat. I am looking through the group right now. And Sam, somebody said it's not fair that several teams get in because they have cupcake schedules and basically play no good teams. Shout out, chat. What's your reaction to that?
You could make that case for just about half of the playoff field, I think. You could make that case for Penn State. I could make that case for Notre Dame. I mean, just about everybody.
This year, you can make a case that disproves or proves everyone's worthiness to be in the playoff except for Oregon, because they have taken care of business. They're undefeated. Of course, their schedule isn't one of the tougher ones in the country, but still, they've taken care of business. They beat Ohio State at home. And that's why they're sitting pretty right now. With even a loss in the Big Ten championship game, they're still safe, right? Well, with everyone else, there's been a lot of headaches, right, for us to decide who are the best teams in the country. Everybody is flawed. The years of a team being dominant, the Nick Saban eras, undefeated, That stuff is over now. It's getting more and more like the NFL. Styles make fights. And that's how it's going to play off here in the play out in the playoffs as well.
Man, just looking at the chat right now, there's a lot of people upset about South Carolina, and I know you are a huge South Carolina fan.
We'll get to it. We're going to get to South Carolina.
I hear you, Chat. I'm
yes.
speaking for you, Chat.
And I'm with you, Chat.
Yes, because Maddie is absolutely with you, Chat. So, but also as we look at the 13 through 25 here, something to keep in mind for the ACC conversation is Clemson wins this Saturday, but ends up being ranked behind the Big 12 leaders. Let's say that's Arizona State. It's possible that the Big 12 champion would be ranked higher than Clemson on Selection Day, therefore giving them the first-round bye in the ACC. Ends up at that 12th spot. Still yet to be played out, but again, you see
it's a good point.
The aforementioned South Carolina right there. Clearly, the committee is relying on head-to-head, Matty.
They are relying head-to-head, and that was something that I kind of gave a little pushback when we were discussing this show, right, leading up to it. I kind of go more of what have you done for me lately? And for Alabama, hey, I've been impressed with you this year. Remember a few weeks ago I was down on them. Then they ripped off 2 great wins in a row. Jalen Milroe's going off. They're playing great offensively. They're playing better on defense. Then they laid an egg against Oklahoma, and for some reason – I still haven't forgotten that egg against Oklahoma, and it's hard for me to do that. Whereas South Carolina, they've improved dramatically. Their young quarterback is making plays. He's an absolute playmaker in the pocket, outside the pocket. The defense is one of the more talented defenses in the country. I mean, Kennard, no doubt. I mean, Tonka Hemingway, these guys are disruptors there, and they can play really good team defense, championship-level defense with that kid playing quarterback. So, that's where, if I was in that room with the committee, I would say recently this is the hottest team in the country, and they need to be rewarded. But, of course, like you said, it's head-to-head, and that's what they're relying on this year.
But real quick, Scoob, like, as we see it right now, there really isn't a path for South Carolina to get in.
No.
Yeah, and that's what I had my eye on coming into this rankings reaction, because where they had those 3-loss ACC teams was essentially the waiting list of who is going to get that spot, right? Soon as I saw Alabama ahead of South Carolina, I was like, okay, they're out. They're done.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that they don't have any more games to prove that they are a top 12 team in the country. Shane Beamer came out. He's been lobbying for it. It's kind of fun to see these coaches all trying to make a case. Lane Kiffin making a huge case for Ole Miss as well. But you look at South Carolina, their losses, LSU, Ole Miss, and Alabama. Right? And unfortunately, you lost to Ole Miss and Alabama. And those are the 2 teams that are ahead of you. And head-to-head seems to matter. But there was one point where the playoff committee showed us that good losses mattered. And now here we are, South Carolina.
And that's what's interesting. The head-to-head, they did lose to those teams, but they also lost to teams that are in the top 25,
Correct.
right? That are good football teams. And that's where I guess you can kind of make the case, too, for they deserve to be maybe ahead of an Alabama. Either they lost the head-to-head, right? Alabama losing to Oklahoma the way that they did, being absolutely dominated from start to finish. That's where I feel like you can have that debate.
Yeah, and shout out Chad again. One of the points made in here, that loss to LSU was without Sellers in the second half of that game. So
and a lot of questionable calls in that one too.
Let's move along here. Ohio State lost and continues to lose to Michigan for 4 straight years now.
All right, let it go,
The
Sam.
Buckeyes could not figure out how to beat that team from up north, and we didn't. Obviously, they weren't going to be left out of the playoff based on that result. But what did happen was they got pushed back now to the 5 spot. And the question now is, if the playoff were to start tomorrow, do we agree with where the committee has placed Ohio State? They do have a really tough schedule, right? The really close loss to Oregon on the road. Now they lose to Michigan, who's, been around a 500 football team. Do you like where the committee has them right now, Matty?
Yeah, I think it's a good position for them to be in. I mean, listen, with how it worked out for them, all right, is it stink that they are now out of the position of being out of the bye, right? Of course it stinks. But, big picture, to not play in the Big Ten championship, they're safe. They're going to get a week off. They're going to let Oregon and Penn State essentially just beat each other up for an extra week, and they'll get ready to prepare for their opponent.
I might have been projecting here because I said Ohio State the 5 spot. They're at the 6 spot. But what could happen, Scoob, is if Penn State, let's say, loses to Oregon in the Big Ten championship game coming up, Ohio State's got the head-to-head over Penn State. So does the committee put Penn State, therefore, behind Ohio State and move Ohio State up to that 5 spot?
I think
they're hoping so.
Right? If you're Ohio State, that's what you want. because that 5 spot, as you guys saw before we got here on this set when we were discussing at the board, it's one of the best paths that you can be. But Sam, you also talked about that 6 spot being a great spot, which we will talk about real soon. So stay tuned for that. But for Ohio State, I mean, you made your bed and you had to lay in it. I'm just going back to that matchup against Michigan. Man, that was a coaching staff blunder. The way that they handled that game. Coming in, you know that you've got injuries all over your offensive line. You know that the best players on Michigan's defense are on their defensive line, their defensive tackles. So what did Ohio State try to do to start the game? They tried to run right between the tackles, and they had to eat their words for it. So right now, Ohio State, they're in a good spot. 6, get your rest. And quite frankly, being in the conference championship isn't necessarily the best thing.
No, and then they had to watch Kyle McCord throw for 400 yards and win later that night. But, you know, are we concerned about Ohio State big picture, though, right, making a run? Do we see Ohio State winning 4 games in a row to be a national champion after what we saw?
I think they have the potential to do it.
I think their defense does. I think they have a quality championship defense. The offense, though, is a big concern for me. I thought that they would start to kind of, you know, turn the corner, be a little bit more explosive, get the running backs involved.
Let it loose.
Let it be more aggressive, right? All I keep hearing about is they got a talented receiving core, they got great running backs. No doubt the offensive line injuries are a concern, but the lack of explosive plays is a huge concern for me in this Ohio State offense.
I think what Ohio State does, they get way too hyped up for that Michigan game, and they lose themselves. They don't become the same
Or they're
team.
too tight.
Yeah, exactly.
A combination.
The emotion, one would like to see.
No doubt.
All right, fans, you can go to ESPN.com/All-State Playoff Predictor to predict who will get into the college football playoffs. There is a tool that can help you forecast who makes it. Yes, very good, Maddie. Maddie's the only one without a telescreen in front of him. He's just working on a notepad there.
Old school, yeah, that's right.
All right, due to the nature of this reaction show, we are constantly kind of starting at the back and working on the bubble. We don't really get a ton of time to talk about the teams that have just kind of cruised along all year long without many hiccups. In the case of Oregon, not one hiccup. They were the only undefeated team throughout the entire country this year. So let's talk about some of these top trending teams, starting with the Ducks. Maddie, I'll come to you. They are the only undefeated team remaining in the country. In their first year in the Big Ten, they have a chance to do something that probably would have been unthinkable to start the year, which is beat the Big Three. If they can beat Penn State this weekend. What do you like about Dan Lanning's squad this year?
I like Dan Lanning because he plays and coaches like a Georgia football team, right? And go figure, right? All this time was Kirby Smart, and it's paying off, right? They're tough, they're physical, they're well coached. They don't make a lot of mental errors. Dylan Gabriel is a seasoned veteran quarterback that doesn't make very many mistakes. The running game, right, with Winnington and James, very strong, very aggressive downhill. The offensive line blocks extremely well. Dylan Gabriel being able to be that point guard with the RPO scheme, making the proper decisions, right, and really just staying ahead of the chains, as they say, right? They're never in, I feel like, terrible situations offensively. And then the defense. The defense plays really good as a unit. They're a little over-aggressive at times, right? So that is a little bit of a concern for me because they can give up some big plays, but great team defense that hustles to the football extremely well.
Texas is another school that has a chance to win a conference title their first year in a new conference in the SEC. What's the ceiling, do you think, for Texas in the playoffs, Scoob?
Oh, they're definitely a team that can win the championship. I think we've all had our eyes on Texas this season, but at times they have underachieved and not played towards their ceiling, and that's specifically on the offensive side of the ball with how they've been able to how they've not been able to create explosive plays, but that running game has been looking great, guys. And it was a concern for me early on when they had all those injuries at the running back position. But Travion Wisner, 180-something yards rushing in the game against Texas A&M, that was huge, especially with a team that's so physical. And on the defensive side, Texas has everything that they need, especially with the pass rush.
Speaking of the run game, Penn State coming into the season was thought to have the best running back room in the entire country with Nick Singleton, Katron Allen. And here they are backing their way kind of into the Big Ten championship game, having to face the #1 team in the entire country in Oregon. But like I mentioned, with a loss, there's a lot on the line for Penn State here. With a loss, they could very well drop out of not only hosting a playoff game, but they may have to go on the road in the college football playoff. So this is a bit of a concern for me in a spot where Penn State, we talk about teams that can win a lot, teams that have a lot to lose going into this weekend. Penn State has a lot on the line.
Yeah, well, I'm sure James Franklin gets a nice bonus that they win the Big Ten championship game. So, we'll take our chances. But, I think it's safe to say, right, if Penn State, even if they lose that football game, right, they're still in it no matter what. Drew Aller, his improvement, right, has been tremendous. They're winning closer games that in the past I feel like they have not, right? So they're a grittier football team than they have been in the past because of their offense being a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more balanced. My one concern is there any other weapon outside the running back room and Tyler Warren on their offense, right? Abdul Carter, one of the best passers in college football. No doubt they can get after the passer and be aggressive. But do they have enough skill groups to make the big plays? That'll be the big concern against some of the better defenses.
Speaking of big plays, Notre Dame has been a team that's been searching for quite a few big plays, but they have won 10 straight since that disaster of a loss to Northern Illinois, and they are beating teams by like an average of 30 points per game. It hasn't really even been that close, Maddie. Based on what you have seen, how far has your confidence level risen in Notre Dame?
All right, big concern for Notre Dame. I worry about the depth and the size and athleticism of their defensive line, right? That's the biggest concern for me. I think the linebacking core and the secondary, led by Xavier Watts, who they put at linebacker at times to get a pressure on the passer, is big time. Christian Gray, he is a legit corner out there, the sophomore, making big plays. Xavier Watts and Christian Gray with the 2 pick sixes late really sealed it. This was the first time they really struggled defensively as a unit all season against USC, but the whole team is predicated around those 2 running backs right there. It's Love, it's Price, and then Riley Leonard. His decision-making in that RPO game, very similar to Dylan Gabriel, but more prevalent about the run game is the biggest thing for them. We watched the film. I watched the film with Sam. I showed him. I'm like, hey, look at this Notre Dame offensive line, man. They work great as a cohesive unit, and that'll be what they'll have to lean on. My question is, can they keep pace in a shootout type of game with the way that their team is structured? So they're a team that needs to play in a low scoring or with a lead.
If the playoff ended today, Alabama would be traveling up to Notre Dame to play that game. Now, obviously, Notre Dame doesn't have great memories of playing Alabama in the playoff. But, yes, that would be a terrific environment. Today is also Giving Tuesday, guys, a global day of giving. It is also the start of ESPN's V Week. When we continue Jim Valvano's fight against cancer, you can make a difference today by supporting cancer research, which is needed now more than ever. If you are able, give now at v.org/donate. That is v.org/donate. 100% of your donation goes to cancer research. All right, continuing here on Rankings Reaction, let's take a look at some of the teams that are on a bubble, and we will put our legal hats on, if you will, and make the case for some of the teams that are either on the outside looking in or vice versa. Miami had a 21-point lead evaporate to Syracuse this past weekend, ended up taking their second loss, and as we have just mentioned, it eventually actually booted them out of the playoff. I want to say this. In Miami's 2 losses this year, Ward completed 50 of his 75 passes for 5 touchdowns and no interceptions.
Right.
Clearly, the problem is not on offense.
Of course not.
But the defense has been abysmal. There's no other way to say it. They have been that bad. And it's been the accumulation of all these close games that I think probably knocked him out, Maddie.
Yeah, I think it's just the whole season, right, when you look at it, and just the close games, right, everything down to the wire, especially with those 2 games that we mentioned earlier. But you're right. It's the fact that they just don't play great team defense. And really the defense, there's nothing where you say, well, at least they get a lot of pressure on the quarterback consistently. They can cover well. You can make it. No, they give up explosive plays. Teams can run the football at times with them. They lose a ton of one-on-one situations on the outside consistently. And that's what I think is the biggest concern. The amount of points that they've given up each and every week is why you can't really trust them as a playoff committee football team.
Is this the 2023 LSU? Like, that's kind of what it feels like, right? With a great quarterback.
Exactly, and that's something that we talked about early on in the season, just because this Miami team, as soon as they get going on the offensive side of the ball, it becomes a track meet. But for the defense, they consistently give up so many points to the other side of the ball. And I just had no faith.
Plays.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's tough to have faith in a team during the playoffs when typically playoff teams do 2 things well. They play defense and they can run the ball.
Right.
And Miami just cannot play defense.
No, they can't. For what it's worth, Miami is also ranked number 14 in ESPN strength of record. That is behind the 3-loss Alabama and the 3-loss South Carolina, for whatever that's worth.
And it stinks, too, because they're entertaining as hell.
They are.
Right? They are a fun watch, right? So
Yeah.
even though they don't play
What's the Heisman
defense,
guy?
I still like seeing Cam Ward in that receiving corps because it's one of the best in the country.
All right, let's go to Alabama now. You can see their resume there at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
2 of their 3 losses, at Vanderbilt and at Oklahoma. Unranked teams at the time, each have 6 losses on the year, but probably no bigger cheerleader this weekend for, SMU. Alabama wants to stay in the race, so
Yeah.
they're going to keep an eye on that ACC championship. What do we like about Alabama? It seems like they're kind of a quarterback-centric driven team, though, like a lot of these teams are.
Yeah, they are, and it really is focused on just the success of Jalen Milroe as a passer and a runner, right? And the team goes where he goes, and I think that's what concerns me the most with this football team, that he is not on as a passer. It's a concern, right? And we've seen that in a few games this year where if they have stopped what I think is a relatively simple passing attack at times, or at least an underprepared, passing attack, there's not a lot of easy completions for Jalen Milroe, right? And that's where, you kind of go back to the Notre Dame and what they do offensively, or Dylan Gabriel in Oregon. They find ways to get their quarterback involved in the game and give him easy completions. Alabama at times struggles to do that for Jalen Milroe, and he really just has to make huge plays in the passing game or break off and run.
South Carolina, we heard the folks in the chat. Obviously, everyone's pretty upset. The South Carolina fans are that South Carolina, at least at the moment, doesn't appear like they have a clear path to the playoff, Scoob. Would you like to make the case for why South Carolina should be in, or would you like to make the case why they are accurately where they should be?
All right, right now South Carolina is undoubtedly the hottest team in the country. 6 straight wins that they've rattled off. And Lenore Sellers, the way that he's playing ball right now, has him as one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. Over 160 yards rushing last week, the 4th most
Look at this
by
play.
a quarterback in South Carolina history. I mean, in his change of direction, every time he gets his hand on the ball, the defense has to pay attention to so many different things offensively when Lenore Sellers gets going. And as soon as he's able to, once he starts being able to throw the ball down the field, I mean, what are you going to be able to do on the defensive side? And then on South Carolina's defensive side of the ball, we just talked about it early on in the show. That pass rush, Luke Kennard, Dylan Stewart, those guys are NFL talents. And when you line them up against any other team in the country, South Carolina can go toe-to-toe with just about anyone. It's just unfortunate that they lost those games early on in the season. And now that they've won, I mean, they were sitting at 3-3, and everyone pretty much wrote them off. And every single week, we're like, "Ooh, dang, South Carolina, dang, South Carolina."
And we know the fans right now are like, I hate those referees from the LSU game, right? Because that's a game where they really outplayed them, right? And because of those penalties, taking points off the board, really is the difference in their season.
3 wins for South Carolina over currently ranked teams for the playoff committee.
Yes.
You got the A&M win, the Missouri win, the Clemson win, obviously, and it's just so funny that Clemson actually has a better and clearer path to the playoff now than South Carolina does, even though,
when Clemson was ranked a little bit higher last week, I thought that was going to be kind of the saving grace for South Carolina, despite the head-to-head losses to those other teams. I thought with Clemson being ranked a little higher, that would have help them at least jump over some teams that they lost to head-to-head. But that's clearly not the case. The committee values those head-to-head matchups. And, the good thing is that Shane Beamer is a really good football coach. He's a great motivator. And this team isn't going anywhere, so just get used to it, SEC fans. South Carolina is here to stay.
Right. All right. You guys are watching Rankings Reaction presented by Allstate. Don't forget, we've got a couple of shows this upcoming Saturday as well. Countdown to Game Day with Christine and the Harry starts at 8:30 Eastern Time. And then we are there to wrap up the day. In the day that was, in a very consequential conference championship weekend, let's take a look at the Allstate Playoff Predictor. And this week we have some really, really intriguing conference championship matchups. Where do you guys want to start? I'll leave it up to you. Where do you guys want to start in this conversation? Which conference you want to start in?
All right. Let's pick it up in the ACC.
All right.
Because we know that's where the drama is, right?
Let's figure out this.
Or do we want to go all or want to be ACC?
No, let's go ACC. Go ahead. Dive right in here. So, obviously, the title game because of the Miami loss. Clemson, SMU playing in this game. What do you got?
Do they survive if they lose. Right?
I say no.
You say no. You say they're out. I feel like there is still that glimmer of hope that they are still in it, and there's a potential then for Alabama to be kicked out.
But the question is,
right?
Clemson would be a bid stealer.
If
Yes.
SMU does lose, right? The question is, do you have any wins against a top 25 ranked opponent right now? Do they?
No.
Exactly. That's a tough thing about it because they don't have any wins against a top 25 opponent. And then if you're SMU, you're going to say, well, we're playing in the championship game. Why should we be punished if we lose? That's because there's our fans of 3 lost teams that are a little bit upset. But we're going to show you right now, to everyone that's watching, if they lose, they have a 36% chance to get into the college football playoff.
I don't love those odds, by the way. I mean, that's
No.
well below 50%.
But you're saying there's a chance.
Let's bring this to all. So, because you're going to see how this affects other teams within the rankings if SMU is to lose, right? So, Alabama is right here. You see Alabama right there. Let me put SMU to lose, 33%. Let's say SMU wins. Alabama's chances goes to 43%. So
Right,
things go up and down based on the ACC championship.
Because Clemson's out. They have no, case for an at-large bid, so they have to win.
Right.
If they lose to SMU, they're out. All right. So that's kind of the ACC. Let's move it around here, and I want to talk about let's go to the Big 12 because this has been a conference we've been following all year long. Now it's kind of dwindled down to these 2 teams here. Iowa State and Arizona State took care of business this past weekend, so they face off in the Big 12 title game. Let's say that Arizona State loses this game, Scoob. Right. So obviously they're a 1-bid league. That's basically the point that we're seeing here.
Yep.
There is no chance that the Big 12 is getting 2 teams in.
Which we would have thought, and that's what Heather's been educating us on too, the past few weeks, is that the Big 12 is probably a one and done. The ACC is also close to that as well. We'll see how that plays out.
How does that affect everything else? Who do you think gets affected the most by the result of the Big 12 championship?
I don't know that it really moves the needle. Now, what
I don't think it does.
What it could do is, like we mentioned earlier, if SMU loses, the Big 12 champion is ranked higher than Clemson is, they get that first round bye, and it pushes Clemson back. But
what if, though, right, and this is something we said earlier in the show, too. If Boise State loses to UNLV, then now we have some pieces moving. Now we have Boise State potentially kicking out Alabama, taking that spot, right?
Okay,
and that leaves.
Let me do that for you right now. So Boise State right now is at a 70% chance. Let's say they lose. It goes down to 1%. Alabama's goes up to 47%.
Okay, so they're out if they lose, then, is basically what they're saying. All right, so there's no chance for them to make it. All right.
Not going to get two teams in from the Mountain West.
Yeah,
but to your point, it's a great point to make. Let's say that does happen.
Let me go ahead and reset
Let's say the UNLV beats and upsets Boise State here.
Right.
Let's say that the Big 12 champion Arizona State is also ranked at 12. So you have, let's say, UNLV and Arizona State, those 2 teams could pick up that 12 and 11 spot.
Yeah.
Right.
Which then would kick out Alabama.
Okay.
So that's kind of the point there.
And I guess, too, if Boise loses to UNLV, then potentially Arizona State gets that first round bye as the 4 seed.
That's the idea.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That'd be fascinating.
What have we
now,
got there?
are we worried about Georgia if they lose being out? Is there any concern for that?
So if Georgia loses, it doesn't change anything.
So they're good. They're safe. Texas is good.
Everyone
They're good.
considering it.
Yeah. Okay.
Texas is safe. All those teams are good. I think where you look at now is the Big Ten. All right. What's going to happen in the Big Ten? Just so everybody knows what's going on.
All right.
Oregon loses. Doesn't really change anything.
Okay.
Penn State, as the winner, is going to end up getting that first round bye, and that's where things really get interesting. So Penn State has a 54% chance to win the Big Ten championship.
I don't know.
More than I had expected, because a lot of people think that Penn State has a chance. They've had a cupcake schedule. They're a team that we haven't really been impressed with all year. They're a team where Tyler Warren is essentially the Superman over that offense.
Right. One ranked win. Illinois.
The Big Ten.
There is a case to be made that, and nobody's going to like me for this, they lose that game. There's a case to be made they shouldn't be in the playoff. Now, I know where the committee has ranked them already, but the case is there for Penn State, I think, to not be in the playoff. They're going to be.
Who replaces them then if they lose? Oregon now, right, gets the first round bye, of course. Okay, Indiana stays, Ohio State stays. who then moves into that spot?
I would love to get the bracket in a little bit. Hopefully the guys
Yeah.
in production can bring up the bracket for us as we talk to SEC. But that's
One of these teams, that would be my answer.
Is that where we get the potential, I guess, Ole Miss? Does Ole Miss then take the spot?
All right, so Ole Miss, I don't know if they get the spot, man, but Texas 62% chance to beat Georgia. Even Georgia has already beat them. I don't know where these analytics are coming from.
Games in Atlanta, guys. Games in Atlanta.
Shout out to the chat. I don't know where this is coming from, but this is what it's saying analytically. So we got the two teams that we probably didn't think would win those games. Penn State and Texas are favored
Let's
currently
just
based on
pick
our
it right
analytics.
now. Who do we think is going to win that football game? Sum, who do you think is going to win Texas-Georgia this week?
I think it's really hard to beat the same team twice.
Okay.
So-
that was my line a week ago, so you totally sold that.
Yeah.
All right. Way to be creative. All right.
So, yeah, I'd take
What do you
Texas.
think? Yeah, you taking Texas?
Man, the safe one is to say Texas.
I'm taking
I would
Georgia.
say, I would say Texas,
taking
but I
Georgia.
feel like it's Georgia, yeah.
Now, listen, like with Texas, I get it. Everything about them, I want to say they're the better football team. But I got to see Quinn Ewers, like, put it together.
Yeah.
And if anybody can frustrate a quarterback and go one-off games to throw a quarterback and an offensive coordinator off, well, guess what? Kirby Smart's the only guy that's done that all year, right? He really made it difficult for them the first time around. I expect that to continue again the second time.
All right, I want to make it clear before we get out of here because the college football season is just reaching a high point, and we have got some shows coming up that I want to make everyone aware of before we get out of here. So we got the college football show coming up on Saturday. We will have you covered for all the college conference championships. We'll have you covered there. And then on Sunday, for our final rankings reaction show, we will have the final 12-team field. So tune in Saturday and Sunday, ESPN College Football YouTube page. For Matt, Skubie, I am Sam, our wonderful crew. Thank you so much for watching Rankings Reaction, presented by Allstate. We'll see you Saturday, everybody.
Thanks for watching.